Hi everyone, you can call me Psycho, and today I'm doing another Mario Kart World video, and this is probably going to be my longest video. I'm anticipating it being my longest video because today I'm going to be ranking all 30 tracks. I believe it's 30 tracks in Mario Kart World. When I say it's my longest video, it's my longest video so far because if this goes well, you know, there's other games that might have more than 3 times this amount of tracks. I'm going to rank every single one, so we're going to be doing it in a tier list. So essentially, I'm just going to be going through, of course, this is my own opinion. Everyone seems to have like really passionate takes on which Mario Kart tracks are their favorite. I don't know, I'm fairly indifferent. I think the main thing that makes Mario Kart fun is like the core gameplay, you know, the driving, the drifting, the items. And I think like even if a track is mediocre, like that's what makes the game fun, is the chaotic nature of it. So mostly I'm going based off of like how fun is the track to play, so like how much like variety is there in the track design itself, and also like how cool is it to look at, I guess, like as an experience driving on the track. Like, is it unique, is it cool, does it have good theming and whatnot? So yeah, I'm gonna go through all 30 of these tracks, and we're gonna start off right here with Mario Circuit. So I've got all the tracks loaded up here. This tier list was made by, if we scroll down, ShyGuyTimmy, and it's on TierMaker, and I'll link it in the description so you can make your own if you wish. But yeah, we're going to start off with Mario Bros. Circuit, which is the first track you play in the game, and I think it's pretty good. Like, it's not bad, and I think the only reason it's memorable is because it was in that initial trailer, and because it is the first track you play in the game. It's kind of similar to something like Figure 8 Circuit in Mario Kart DS, where like that is the most bland, forgettable track of all time, but it's memorable because it's the first track in the first cup. Obviously, I'm not saying this is as bad as Figure 8 Circuit, because I think there is a lot of fun to be had with the rail grinding, and there's path switches you can do. Like, there's cool techniques, there is some interesting shortcuts if you're really advanced at it. But overall, like, I'm not usually a big fan of desert-themed tracks. This kind of just feels like a desert-themed track, and it's kind of weird that they wanted this to be the opening track of the game. So yeah, I think that's probably a C for me. I'm probably going to drop that in C right here. All right, so next up we have Crown City, and this I think is a really cool location in free roam. You know, there's like twice as many question mark panels you can find in this track in free roam, and I think it's a really beautiful environment. It feels like, you know, you took something like New Donk City from Mario Odyssey and put it into a Mario Kart game, which is really cool. And it's even more detailed than that is, obviously, since it's on the Switch too. So yeah, I think visually and, you know, the environment and all that, really cool to look at, really fun to explore, but it's not really it's not my favorite track to drive on, simply because like the entire ending, you're like on a glider, and even though you can go down like onto the railings and kind of trick off of them and whatnot, it's not the most engaging track. A lot of it is kind of spent in the glider. There's not a lot of like really tight turns or anything like that. It's a lot of just kind of driving around the city. It's kind of forgettable for me. I don't think I've driven on this one nearly as much as the other ones. It's not bad. I think it's a little better than Mario Bros. Circuit, but I don't think it's one of my top favorites. So I think I'd still drop that in C. We might switch these things around later. Also, I know some people do it where they like, you know, rank it within the tiers. At that point, just do a ranking video. You know, that's not how I'm doing the tier list. The tier list, like, just kind of look at everything in that section as the same rank. I feel like that's the point of a tier list, so that's the way I'm doing this. Just keep that in mind, I guess. So, yeah, I'll put Crown City in C. Maybe I'd bump it up to a B because I feel like it is a little more memorable than Mario Bros. Circuit, but I think C is a good spot for that. All right, next we got the first one of my favorite tracks in here. This one's definitely going in S. I'll say that already right now. This track, there's tons of like rail grinding and tricking and jumping between rails and onto billboards and things like that. And there's different paths you can take, but it's not too many to where it's confusing and overwhelming. Like, it's pretty easy to figure out what the fastest path is, and I do really enjoy that. And the theming and the vibe of the track, like, I like trains, so I do really enjoy the idea of having a track be like, you know, a train station in the mountains. It's just a really cool visual treat to look at, and it's really fun to drive through. There's some really fun shortcuts, lots of rail grinding on the railroads, obviously. Yeah, this one's going in S for me. I really enjoy this one. Every time I see it pop up on a track selection, I vote for it, so that's going to be my pick, my first S rank, and I don't think that one's moving. All right, so next up we have DK Spaceport. Now, this one I really like. It is a sectional track. I'm not a big fan of sectional tracks. I much prefer lap tracks, but this does have a lot going on. Lots of rail grinding, lots of like wall driving. It isn't technically faster. I believe I've heard that it is not faster to jump onto the walls in that specific section, but it's so much more fun, so I don't really care. So I always jump on the walls and trick off the walls. Like, there's lots of fun stuff that they obviously want you to do in it. It's also a really unique idea, like taking the aesthetics of, you know, the original Donkey Kong game and turning it into this like rocket spaceport. Like, that's so random, but it's so cool at the same time. And I really like that. I think that's really cool and unique. And like I said, I think driving on the track is really fun. There's lots of fun tricks you can do on the track as well. So I'm gonna put that in an A. I think that can go in A. I think that's a really solid track. Or no, maybe B. I'll go B, because like I said, sectional track, once again, the tricks are really fun to do, but they don't necessarily make you go faster. Maybe I'll put it down at B instead. That makes a little more sense. All right, so next we have Desert Hills. This is going to be our first low tier track. I really loved this one in Mario Kart DS. Maybe that's just because of nostalgia, but I don't feel like this really recaptured the same vibe. I've probably driven through this track dozens of times in free roam and not even noticed it was a track, because it really does just kind of feel like a road. There's nothing memorable or remarkable about the theming of this track. It just feels like a road in the middle of a desert. So yeah, I feel like that one's pretty mid. Once again, I'm not a big fan of desert tracks typically, which I guess the DS version of this was an exception to that. But yeah, among all these other tracks, maybe it was a faithful recreation, but I don't feel like it did it justice, because I feel like the DS track was really memorable and felt like really bright and vibrant and colorful, and it really stood out in Mario Kart DS. Maybe it just doesn't stand out in this game, but I feel like it's just kind of a mediocre adaptation. So I'm going to put that in D. I don't know if any of these will end up in F. I feel like that's probably the worst track in the game, for me at least. Maybe there's a different one that would be lower, but I think all these tracks are pretty decent in their own right, so maybe I won't use the F tier, but we'll find out. All right, so next up we have Shy Guy Bazaar. I really loved the Mario Kart 7 version of this track. The 3DS version is really great. I think this is a really great, update to it. I feel like I've driven on this track a lot. I don't remember doing a lot of unique tech, but I know there are spaces where you can drive on the walls, and there's like wires you can drive on above. But yeah, it's not really the most complicated track from what I can remember, but maybe I'm missing something. Let me know in the comments if there's like a crazy shortcut I'm forgetting about. But I really love the theming of the track. I think it's a really good version of Shy Guy Bazaar, which should have come back in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, but I'm glad it came back here, and it fits really well into Mario Kart World and stands out. So I think I'll drop that in a B. I can't think of much wrong with it, but I can't think of like anything super remarkable about it, at least gameplay wise, so I'm gonna drop that in a B. All right, next up we've got Wario Stadium. Now there's been a lot of different versions of Wario Stadium. I think it's a really fun track usually. This feels like a completely new version, mostly because the best way to drive on this track is by not driving on the track for half of it. So there's lots of fun rail grinding and wall driving shortcuts you can do, which I'm still trying to learn because they are pretty hard. But it's really cool that the mechanics of this game are utilized so well in this track. Makes it a lot of fun. Lots of tight turns, lots of jumps. Very fun. Love the aesthetics of it as well. You've got the giant Wario face right here with the fireworks and the flamethrowers. Just feels like a motocross arena. It's really, really fun. I really enjoy this one. Not necessarily like my favorite visually, because it is kind of just a lot of dirt and metal, but that's the aesthetic they're going for and they nail it. So I think I'd drop that one in A. I think that's a really solid A. This could go in S, but I'm trying to be very selective with what I put in the S tier. I feel like that has to be like the best of the best, and I feel like Whistle Stop is the only one so far that's gone there. But Next up we have Airship Fortress, which is already a track that I've always loved ever since Mario Kart DS, and I think it's a really cool remake of that track. I think adding in the rails and certain things like that, like in the area with the flamethrowers coming down from the ceiling, you can trick on the rails to avoid it. Super cool, great way to implement that. You could drive on the rails at the beginning to avoid the bullet bills. There's a lot of cool ways they've implemented the mechanics of this game into this track, and I think it makes it really fun, and it was already one of my favorite tracks probably of all time, because it's just such a cool way to adapt a Mario Brothers airship level into a Mario Kart track, and I think that's really cool. I think this is definitely the best version of the track we've seen, and I think that's probably got to go in S as well. It's really fun to drive on, really, really cool visually, and the theming is great, so I would say that goes in S as well. All right, so next up we have DK Pass. DK Pass is one of my favorites from Mario Kart DS. It was really cool in Mario Kart 7 as well, but I'm really just not super into it. I know there's some cool stuff you can do, like tricking off of the trees and such in the end, but it's really not, it doesn't stand out much to me in Mario Kart World. Maybe there's just too many other good tracks, but it does kind of just, it is a very faithful recreation of DK Pass, but it is not necessarily my favorite one in this game because it just doesn't really stand out that much. It's just kind of is DK Pass in Mario Kart World. For me, I think this would be a B, a solid B. All right, so next up is Starview Peak, which is unfortunately not Peak in my opinion. Once again, kind of forgettable. Like stylistically, it's really cool. Feels like something out of Mario Galaxy. But I feel like there's just like a lot of wide turns, not a ton of shortcuts. Like I know you can probably like do some fancy stuff like tricking off of the side. But I'm more of a casual player. I can't really do all the crazy stuff. I don't know how difficult that stuff is. I mean, I learned some of the crazy shortcuts, but I haven't really seen anything on Starview Peak that really stands out to me. Just kind of a mediocre track. I think I'd drop that in C, but visually it's really, really cool. I like that the interior of it is kind of like a library. That's kind of unique. I enjoy that. But yeah, moving on to the next one, which is a massive improvement over its last version. We've got Sky High Sundae. So this was in Mario Kart Tour and Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and this is a far superior version from the 8 Deluxe version. The 8 Deluxe version like looked like they took it out of a mobile game, and it's very flat textures, just weird incoherent stuff, like you can just like clip through the railing for some reason. It was just kind of like an oval, and there were some trick jumps you could do, but overall it was kind of like when Sky High Sundae showed up in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, it's like, oh come on, not this track. But in here it's great because there's fun shortcuts, there's fun rail grinding, and you can even, like, on the big wide turn at the end, you can trick onto the wall and drive through it faster, which is really cool. The amount of detail they put into it as well makes it look incredible. So this is definitely the most appetizing looking track in Mario Kart World, so I think I'd have to drop that in A. I think that's a really solid A. Very fun track. Alright, so next up we have Wario Shipyard, another 3DS track. I really loved this one on the 3DS. I always thought it was really cool. The music's great. And I think it works really well in like the open world map. Quite frankly, there's just too much water. And I do not like the way the water driving feels in this game. I much prefer the 3DS version of this track where you can drive underwater instead of having to drive on the water. I'm just not a fan of the water physics, really. They just kind of are annoying. And pretty much this entire track you're driving on water, I feel like. So yeah, this one's probably going to be a C for me because I just really don't enjoy driving on it. But I don't think it's necessarily bad. I think the layout is fine. And I think in free roam, like I said, it's really fun to explore. And yeah, I love the aesthetics and the visuals of it. But yeah, I just think that's got to go in C because I just don't enjoy driving on water. And you've got to drive on water pretty much the whole time in that track. All right, so next we have Koopa Troopa Beach. So this track is cool, like theming wise. I think making it kind of like a beach rave with these giant speakers and like a DJ Koopa Troopa is like really fun, and I wouldn't have expected them to go that direction with it. And that's kind of what's really cool about this game is they do a lot of stuff like that. It's like, oh, I wouldn't have expected them to remake that track like that. But yeah, I do really like that aspect of it, but other than that, it is kind of just a circle pretty much with some off-road shortcuts, and so it's just kind of a bagging track, and you just kind of hang back and get speed items and take the shortcuts and get a decent spot. But yeah, it can be kind of chaotic, it can be kind of fun. It's not bad at all. I think this is going to be another one that's going to have to go in C, maybe B, because I do enjoy the chaos of it a little bit. I do really like what they did with it stylistically. So yeah, maybe that one's gonna go in B. All right, so next up we got Faraway Oasis. Now this one's one of my all-time favorites. I've spent a lot of time driving on this one. So much fun you can have driving on like the ropes and the rails. There is water in the track, but it doesn't feel like it takes up the whole track. The ending is really fun because there's an off-road shortcut that goes into another alternate path next to the finish line, which is really cool. Like I said, I'm not usually a big fan of desert-themed tracks, but this one's like they did something cool with it. They made it an oasis. So we've got palm trees, we've got water, we've got animals. You know, like it's a lot of fun to drive on this track and just look at all the fun stuff. And to come across it in free roam was really cool as well. I think this one's really cool. I think this one's got to go in S for me as well, which kind of may be contradictory since I said I don't like water tracks. But once again, the water doesn't bother me in this one. You can avoid the water. You can drive on the rails instead. There's alternate paths you can take. So yeah, that one's going to be an S for me. I love it. I think that's a great track. All right, next we have Peach Beach. Now this one, I think it looks really beautiful. I think what they did, like sculpting this castle, looks great. Really fun to find that in free roam. I've taken some cool screenshots of it. But yeah, it's another one that kind of changes every lap. There's a whole like section, I believe it's at the end of the final lap, where you're just driving on water in a straight line, and I really don't like that. And there's a lot of cool stuff you can do, tricking on wires and, you know, jumping on walls and stuff like that. But I'm pretty sure most of the time it's faster to just drive on the ground in this track as well. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of this one. Not a lot of like really cool stuff you can do with it. I think that one's going to have to go in C for me as well. All right, next we have Salty Speedway. Now, I think you already know what my opinion is going to be on this one, but I do really enjoy exploring it in free roam. There's a lot of cool stuff you can do, tricking around on the rooftops and exploring it, and it's just a really beautiful looking environment. But the track is pretty much entirely water, so yeah, you know, too much water. Not a fan of water. Gonna have to drop that one in a C as well, I think. All right, so next up we have Dino Jungle, and this once again goes to show what I was talking about, where this game just takes older tracks and remakes them in really unique ways. And so I think this track is really, really cool what they did with it, because it's like an abandoned research lab that's been destroyed, and there's dinosaurs running through it, where like in the original version of the track, you know, or at least the 3DS version, which is the one I've played, you're just kind of driving around, you drive through a cave, there's like, you know, the big like brachiosaurs like stepping on you, but they added so much more to this. You've got a T-Rex that comes out and tries to chomp you. There's like a Triceratops you can drive up like a ramp. There's just so much fun you can have with that. It's fun to come across in free roam because it's just this little like abandoned like research lab location, and there's dinosaurs all around it. It's just really cool. Feels like they took a lot of inspiration from something like Jurassic Park. It's also really fun to drive on. Cool shortcuts. This one's got to be an S for me as well. I really love this, maybe just because I like dinosaurs. Might be biased. I don't know. I don't care. It's an S. All right, so next up is the Great Question Block Ruins. Now, I have a love-hate relationship with this track because I think it's awesome. I think it's a really unique idea. They executed it really well. You know, the turns are really tight. The track layout is great. The reason I hate this track is because I always f up that final shortcut, which is like really fun to do if you do it right, but I don't know how to do it right because, like I said, I'm a pretty casual player. So if you know how to do that shortcut, you probably love this track, but I can't do that shortcut, so I hate this track. But I know that's a skill issue. I think I'm still going to drop this one in A, just because I think the ending of the track is kind of like, if you aren't doing that final shortcut, it's like bouncing on clouds, which is kind of slow, and then, you know, you take a really tight turn, and then you're just kind of floating on a glider, so kind of the whole ending of that track is just kind of meh. But I think that one's still a solid A. All right, so next up we have Cheap Falls. There are some fun shortcuts in this one. I really love the theming in it. I think it's really cool, really fun to explore. But for obvious reasons, I'm going to have to put it in B. All right, so next up we have Dandelion Depths. I think this one's really cool. I don't remember much about it, like gameplay-wise. I feel like it's pretty forgettable as far as the track gameplay goes. But like the theming is really cool. It's like a kind of like an industrial like mining area, and you go down into this cave, and there's the pair of bitty buds in there, and there's light peeking through, and there's like water in the ground if I remember correctly. I think that's really cool. So I think visually it's really cool, but it's really forgettable. Like I just replayed through all of these in preparation for this video. Couldn't really tell you anything like remarkable about the gameplay of this track, so I'm probably gonna have to drop that one in C as well. All right, next up is Boo Cinema. Now this track is awesome, and it's not just because I'm a movie nerd. It's because it's awesome, and it has probably the best theming of like any Mario Kart track ever. It feels like you're driving into an old movie theater. They captured that vibe perfectly. You drive into the screen and you drive on a film reel as the track. Like that's so creative, and it's just like the perfect way to kind of do like a haunted house kind of track that they've done so many times before, and instead just have my dog barking in the background. And turn it into something cool like, oh, what if we did like a scary movie themed track and had to go into an old theater? It's just one of the best ideas in this game. Even though I don't feel like the track layout is super great, like it's good, but it's not super memorable or super great. I don't really care because I just love the theming that much. So that one's going to have to go in S for me. All right, so next up we have Dry Bones Burnout. Now this is kind of an interesting one because I feel like this is a pretty solid track. I can't really think of anything wrong with it other than maybe like there is a lot of alternate paths. There is a lot of fun tech you can do. The problem is maybe there's too many alternate paths. I'm just remembering a lot of sections where it just feels like there's too many different options and I never know which one to go with. So maybe I'd have to look up a time trial to know what the fastest path is. But it's just kind of overwhelming. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing because you can figure out what the fastest path is if you try hard enough. But I don't feel like this track has much of its own identity. There are some unique ideas in there and some unique theming that they've got going on, but for the most part it kind of just feels like a Bowser's Castle track that isn't a Bowser's Castle track. So yeah, I'm probably gonna have to drop that one in B because like I said, I don't feel like there's anything really wrong with it. I think it's really solid, but it's just there's nothing really super special about it. All right, Moo Moo Meadows. I actually don't feel like I have strong opinions on this one. I feel like I don't remember the Mario Kart World version of this one a lot, even though, like I said, I just replayed it recently. When I think Moo Moo Meadows, like what's popping into my head is the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe version. I don't really have a strong opinion on this. I feel like it's like iconic, but I really don't have strong opinions on it. I think it's fine. I think it's good. I think I could drop that one in B as well. All right, so the next up is Choco Mountain. Now, this one's really cool because it is like completely unrecognizable compared to all the older versions of it, which I think is cool because I remember driving on it and like realizing halfway through that it was Choco Mountain, and I was like, what? Like, holy shit, like they completely changed everything about the track, and I think that's really cool. But once again, I can't think of anything like super special about it. There's some cool off-road shortcuts and things like that, but it's nothing really super remarkable or unique. It's just a really solid remake of an older track that I like. So I think that one's going to go in A for me. I don't think there's anything like super crazy about it, but nothing really wrong with it at all. It's a really good track. So next up we have Toad's Factory. This was actually the first time I experienced this track because I never owned Mario Kart Wii. I played it a few times, but I never owned it, so I never experienced Toad's Factory. So this was my first time. I think it's a really cool track. Once again, kind of like Choco Mountain. Nothing crazy about it. Nothing really wrong with it. I think there's a lot of fun like rail grinding tech you can do, which is like probably, I guess you're finding out since I've said rail grinding tech so many times in this video, probably my favorite thing about the game. I like wall driving as well. There's alternate paths you can take. The music's great in Toad's Factory as well. It's fun to come across in free roam. I find myself driving around it. It's a really satisfying track to drive on. I think there's a lot of fun to be had with it, and it's surprising that it hadn't gotten a remake, like in Mario Kart 7 or in Mario Kart 8 or in the Booster Course Pass, and now we're finally getting it, and it is great. So I think I'm going to have to drop that one in A as well. That's a really solid track. Alright, so next up we have Bowser's Castle. This is probably my favorite Bowser's Castle track in the whole Mario Kart franchise. I think that the color palette and the lighting effects in this game really make like the fire and the lava effects pop really well and look really, really great. It's really fun to like find and come across in free roam because it is kind of like intimidating, you know, you've got to go up into it and whatnot. It's a really, really cool way to do a Bowser's Castle, I think. And of course, you've got that gap jump shortcut in there, which is really fun to pull off and really satisfying. And it's always worth going for because it gives you a good drop-off point. It's not obviously as good as actually getting the shortcut, but it's better than not going for it. So like that's really fun that there is a shortcut that you can do. So yeah, I think this is a really great track. I love the way it looks. I love the way it drives. Once again, lots of tight turns, off-road shortcuts, which are in the lava, so you have to really do them right or else you're gonna, you know, fuck it up and you're gonna be in lava. Yeah, that one's gonna be an S for me. I really can't think of anything wrong with that track, and I think it has really fun tech and shortcuts in it, so that one's gotta go in S. That might be the last S in this whole list. If we end up with more S's than A's, I guess that would be kind of surprising, but we'll see. All right, Acorn Heights. Now, visually, this one's really cool. It kind of feels like if Maple Treeway was in summer, if that makes sense. But that kind of goes to show we've seen tracks like this. We've seen tracks that kind of take place in the forest or in a big tree. But it is really cool. There's some cool shortcuts in there. There's some fun rail grinding stuff. Not super remarkable. It's just kind of something we've seen done before, and it's not necessarily my favorite one, but once again, really solid. Can't think of anything wrong with it. I love the way it looks visually. I think that one's going to have to go in B for me. All right, so next up we have SNES Mario Circuit. Now, this is a much better version of the track compared to the version that was in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. But it is still kind of the same thing. Like, this track kind of plays the same no matter where it is. It's just basically one long shortcut that you just have to bag for items on. But I still think it's cool, but I would have rather seen something like if they had to have a Mario Circuit, I would rather they remade like DS Mario Circuit or something like that. I think that would be a lot more interesting because I feel like we've just seen this track so many times and it's really not that interesting. But it's always kind of fun and chaotic. So I think that one's going to probably go in B for me. It's solid. It's just kind of the same thing we've seen before, and I would have rather seen a different Mario Circuit come back, but it's still cool. All right, next up we have Peach Stadium. Now, this track, the only reason it's memorable for me is because every time I'm driving around in free roam, I somehow end up at Peach Stadium, and I think that's just because it's the center of the map. Other than just having a track within Peach's castle, it's really not super remarkable visually or aesthetically. The track driving is really not that interesting. There aren't that many like interesting shortcuts or anything. It's just like a perfectly mediocre track. It just kind of is what it is. There's a lot of tracks like that in other Mario Kart games. This one, like being the center of the map, like maybe I would have liked something a little cooler. It kind of does just feel like driving on a racetrack that was just kind of like plopped in the middle of Peach's castle. So it's fine. I think that one's going to have to go in C for me because it's really just not terribly interesting at all to me, but it's fine. All right, we're on to the last one, which this one might make some people mad. I'm not really a huge fan of this Rainbow Road. I think it's cool. I love me a good Rainbow Road. I just don't really love this Rainbow Road. I don't think it's terribly challenging or interesting, and I think like visually it is pretty because this game is really fucking pretty, so of course Rainbow Road is going to look great. But in Mario Kart 7, when you're like driving on planets and stuff in Rainbow Road, it's like, whoa, this is cool. This is a cool way to take Rainbow Road. But then in this game, you're like, I still don't understand why you're like driving on water in one part of it. Maybe I'm dumb. Can someone explain that to me? Because I don't get it. But that to me shows me like maybe they ran out of things to do with the concept of a Rainbow Road because they've just got to like throw in random things that isn't really part of a Rainbow Road. So yeah, it's not necessarily my favorite. I don't think it's the most fun Rainbow Road to drive on. I don't think that like, you know, visually and aesthetically it is necessarily the best Rainbow Road either. This one I think I'll put in B because once again, it's a sectional track. I don't really love sectional tracks other than 3DS Rainbow Road, apparently. So that one's going to go in B for me, I think. So this is my completed list. I guess we can look over it and see if there's anything I want to change. My S rank, it's going to be Whistle Stop. We got Airship Fortress. We got Faraway Oasis. We got Dino Jungle, Boo Cinema, and Bowser's Castle. I think I'd still stand by that. I think that's a solid S tier. No F tiers, like I said. I don't think any of these tracks are like atrociously bad. I think they're all good. You know, Desert Hills is just the most mediocre and forgettable track out of all of these. So yeah, that's going to be my tier list. Once again, coming from a fairly casual player. Once again, everybody's got their opinions on Mario Kart tracks. So if you disagree, I'd love to hear what you guys think, because this seems to be the most polarizing thing that Mario Kart fans can discuss, but it's also the most fun thing to discuss, apparently, because this is what adds variety and spice to the gameplay, is the tracks. I think, you know it's always going to be chaotic. You know, you've always got your items and the driving mechanics are always going to be good, but which tracks are the most fun? You know, that's where the variety kind of ends up coming from. The reason you don't see people like, oh, let's do a ranking of all the characters, is because like objectively you can find which character is going to be the most optimal character and the most optimal build. But like with the tracks, it is kind of a subjective thing. So I think that's why people like talking about it, and that's why I like talking about it. So I'm planning on doing more of these. I'm going to try to do a Mario Kart 8 Deluxe one. If I can't do it all in one video because there's 96 fucking tracks in that game, I'm going to try to do it in 2 different videos, one for the main game and one for the Booster Course Pass DLC. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. Might do some for some other Mario Kart games as well. So if that's something you're interested in, leave a like, stick around. I'm trying to get a video out every week. Don't know how well that's going to go, but it's been going well so far. So I hope you guys have been enjoying the content lately. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you stick around, and I will see you all in the next one. Goodbye.